is the maiden voyage of Security Superfriends, and I am super duper excited to have one of my extra special super friends here, Garrett Held. Garrett, really great to see you.
It's great to see you too, Rich. I'm glad to be talking to you again.
Awesome. Yeah, it's exciting times, a lot of change going on in the world at large, particularly with coronavirus, and even in the world of security. We just had the Twitter hack and all that. But how are things for you? How has the change impacted you and what you're doing?
It was pretty interesting. This change happened right as I joined Carta, and I've been exercising a lot more, eating better though. But we've been trying to be flexible with teams because mixing work from home under these conditions is pretty difficult with normal work priorities.
Right. Yeah, I found, I don't know if it's good or bad for people who are workaholics. I've been finding a lot of time spent working, less time commuting. It's been good for me. So yeah, it's afforded me the ability to do things like this that maybe wouldn't have happened otherwise. Well, the reason I wanted to, of course, talk to you is because you were a friend, but a longtime security practitioner, and particularly, you're one of those people, I suppose, like myself. You've got a pretty strong, you've got the software background, obviously the security background, a long cloud background, having been, Salesforce and whatnot. But I thought maybe you could tell the people who will listen and watch a little bit about your background. I'd say, please feel free to go into detail, because I'm sure there are a lot of folks who are interested. How do they get to where you are? So please.
Yeah, I had a very unusual path in that I started as a developer, well, a rather bad developer, back when I was much younger. And from that, I always had an interest in security and was able to use that to find problems in other people's code and find problems in other people's websites. And so I spent a lot of time in consulting, doing red teaming work, penetration testing, and code reviews. After a while of that, I got tired of writing up a lot of the same vulnerabilities over and over again and moved to the defensive side. I joined a team at Salesforce, and there I joined the product security team, where we did a lot of defensive stuff, which was a lot more challenging, I have to say. Using my startup experience, I was also able to build a team out there that focused on mergers and acquisitions and the diligence process. That gave me exposure to a lot of different setups, build pipelines, and security requirements of different companies. I also went back to a startup after that, did a little bit more technical work around in the RAS space, runtime application security protections. There I built different agents, built different code, was a little bit more product, but was the security person for a security startup, which was very stressful in itself. But I eventually wanted to build teams again and wanted to work with you, Rich, and joined Twilio. And there I was able to build up the application security team, the cloud security team, and the automation function as well. And just recently I made the move to Carta, where I'm taking some of those lessons learned from Salesforce, from Carta, from Twilio, and putting them to use at Carta.
Great, that's an awesome story. Great companies, and you're definitely on the leading edge of what we're calling, for lack of better, cloud native. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the change that you've seen, particularly in security skill sets, the ecosystem. What has the change meant, particularly if you think about kind of early cloud, let's say from Salesforce early days through Twilio was perhaps one of the first cloud native companies, now to Carta, where, maybe even a different ecosystem. Maybe you can talk about that progression and what it's meant for security and what it's meant for you, perhaps in different skills, different approaches, and what have you.
Yeah, as I said, Salesforce was quite the gambit of situations, from 4-month release cycles for the main product to continuous releases in the cloud products. So really learning how to make our tools run inside the pipeline instead of having a review time, locking down, hardening the environments, and then working with the teams. Instead, we had to work on the fly and use tools that would keep up with development teams as they created things. That became even more important at a company like Twilio, where not only do we have the normal web and API security concerns, we also are dealing with really old communications and really new communications from SIP to 5G security that we have to worry about.
Right. Would you consider where you are now? I mean, like at the time, we considered Twilio to be 100% cloud native, right? And as I reflect back on Twilio, great, fantastic company, at least, while I was there, Kubernetes wasn't even a thing really, right? So no shame not being on it, just was not a thing. As we look at the world, we look at what it means to do distributed compute. We think of ephemeral workloads and things like that. We really think of Kubernetes and that sort of control plane. We would say that that kind of defines a new modern cloud native company, right? Would you say that's where you are now as opposed to then?
Yeah, Carta is a little bit younger and has had the chance to take advantage of a lot of those technologies. And I think they're able to move a little bit quicker because of that. And that has also opened up a lot of security advantages, and that we can take advantage of some of the new techniques to secure that ecosystem.
Great. And I was going to kind of drill into that a little bit. As a CISO working in what's largely 100% cloud native org, what are some of those things, those changes that you can take advantage of? The good, the evil, what have you? What do you see as an opportunity for security?
Really, it's that ability to have insight into what they're doing and be able to react quickly to it. Because things aren't long lasting, patching is much easier because it goes out with new deployments. We also have APIs for almost everything. So if we need to, one of the first things that you think about is inventory, both of data and of the systems themselves. And so now that's all available automatically. And then once you do like foundational stuff like patching, making sure that the correct settings are in place, making sure that you have that inventory, you want to automate it. And so you can also use those same techniques that they're using to deploy software to deploy your automation to help maintain their software.
Right. Okay. Great. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So we've talked about kind of the ecosystem, what's about you, and what's changed in the ecosystem. I want to talk a little bit more about, as a leader in a cloud native environment, what are some of the skill sets you're looking for? What's top of mind for you as you look to build out your org and you think about the things that you need to be able to work with a young, fast-moving cloud native company?
Really, we're looking for that person that bridges the old school security of consulting and only doing the theoretical work on security, instructing people on what they should be looking for, and the DevOps engineers who are going to build things into the pipeline, going to build platforms that other teams can use. We want to take the security from the tools and give it to the developers where they're working, whether that's in editors, whether that's in the CI/CD pipeline, and make sure it's available and they know exactly how secure they are and what they should be doing different.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So in light of that, in terms of giving developers the tools and the things that they need, kind of, we call that, meeting people where they are, right? It's kind of I guess a DevOps sort of meme there. In terms of culture, would you say that you guys are more build? There's a build versus buy spectrum. There's a little bit of both, but in light of it being a software-defined environment, very kind of developer-y, you're trying to integrate with their workflows. Where would you say you are, and I'd say even broader, where do you see things going on that kind of spectrum?
We make a lot of use of the term leverage, which is maximizing what we can do with the resources we have. So we're going to buy when our time could be better spent doing something else. If there's something common that a lot of companies face, there's usually a product out there for it. And there's no sense in us building the same thing over and over again. However, if there's something custom to the way our application works, or there's some new method that may be a research project as well, we're going to look at building that. And then, of course, we're always building the glue that holds a lot of these things together.
That seems like a very mature perspective. And for those of you who are listening, that's not always the case, particularly in Silicon Valley, particularly where some of the places that Youre and I have worked in the past. And not that it's wrong, but there's some groups where, if it's not invented here, it's not anything. And then I've seen companies all the other way where if you're expected to know how to develop or build anything, it's not going to fly, right? And I think this kind of optimized mindset is I think it's appealing. It's good. It's good to hear. So how do you approach, and we're going to switch gears a little bit more now. You're a CISO. You are someone who has to probably report to the board on a quarterly basis or audit committee, obviously an executive right in the center there. Let's just bring it up a little bit and talk about risk management and your thoughts on risk management, again, in a cloud native, in a very successful cloud native company. How are you thinking about that? And perhaps how is it different than how you may have seen or approached these things in the past?
Yeah, I approach risk management from the economist side. Is I want to build in the incentives and rewards for doing risk management correctly for the organization. I'm hoping to publish more about this later this year, but it's really a matter of creating security ownership within the organization. We're doing that by using quantification and gamification, not necessarily as a strict dollar amount, but more sort of as a relative risk to other scores. And bringing those risks into the teams themselves so that they can own it and they can decide which risk they want to go after, because then they'll know exactly which ones are more important to the organization.
Yeah, I like that. There's this freedom and responsibility, and historically risk management has been, I don't know, call it high-level shaming, but in this case, what you're trying to do is allow those people who may be risk owners to be able to make the decisions themselves, to take actions, which if I'm hearing you correctly, that seems to make a lot of sense in the more modern, development-oriented sorts of organizations where you have small teams. They're typically accountable to the services they're building. They're desirous to do the right things from an engineering perspective. And instead of security saying, "Hey, look, shame on you, you've been bad," here is a way to start understanding risk and own it and make the decisions. Did I kind of get that right, at least in terms of the point of view?
That's exactly it. Risk is a fact of life, and it's really about being honest with ourselves about what we're taking on and how important that is to the company.
Okay.
And that allows them to hold themselves accountable for that. Perfect.
Now I have one of those silly questions that I get asked a lot, and therefore I'm going to thwart you with this silly question as well. Let's assume that you had these things that we will act like they're mutually exclusive, but we know they're not. But if you had to rank order these security things, and by the way, you can come back with your own list of top 3 or top 5 things, but if you had to rank order these things: data security, SDLC, identity management, privacy, insider threat, how might you rank order those things? It doesn't have to be those things. And again, those are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but when you think of how you are thinking about things in cloud native, obviously in a company that's involved with, finance and regulations and whatnot, how are you thinking about these things?
That's a tough one. That's a tricky one. You always get is like, what's your most important priority? So, well, they're all pretty important. So you can't always ignore them. But if I had to choose, data security would probably be number 1. I mean, keeping data secure is the top priority. If you're not going to do that, the other stuff really doesn't matter that much. And then identity management. So having strong role-based access to that data and being able to track who accessed what would be next. After that, I'd say SDLC, because it's extremely important. I built, had many jobs where I focused only on that. I love it, but if data security would definitely come above that. And then I'd say insider threat, which after the Twitter attack, obviously everyone's concerned about, but has been on the mind of people for a long time too.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think about this. I think about the shared responsibility model, right? I'm assuming you guys, like everyone else, you're using a lot of SaaS. You obviously have, cloud providers you're using. And, as more and more gets abstracted away, the more of the shared responsibility in theory is going over to those third-party providers. But there are certain things for us as a business, which we'll always own. I think you kind of articulated that, right? The reality is that we're collecting data from our customers, and we're then shoveling it in somewhere where it's either getting persisted, processed, or all above. And we're going to be held accountable, at least in some part or whole, for what might happen to that data from a nefarious perspective, particularly it's at the layer that we own. I'm wondering, as you think about cloud native and you think about serverless, right? As we think about even more abstraction, right? We're extracting more and more and more. We're going into more serverless stuff. What do you think in terms of shared responsibility? Will that change your rank ordering of things? Will that make a change in terms of what's important there? Will it make a change in terms of SDLC, or no, it's all the same, or even more so?
It changes a little bit about how we think about it, but the fundamentals won't change. So we're going to want to know, keeping things up to date, whether, some of that may be taken care of with serverless, but other things like libraries, third-party libraries still exist in serverless. Making sure that we have the correct settings on all these things. So that's an additional layer of settings and best practices that we have to worry about. So Kubernetes adds another layer, but there are all sorts of configuration things that you have to worry about in Kubernetes now, in addition to what you had before. You can add on AWS Lambdas, but you have to worry about permissions, roles, and what they can do inside the account. So the fundamentals stay the same, but it just adds another layer of what you're going to be checking for and looking for.
Right. So I have two more questions for you, and these kind of go into the leadership area. So you're in the security group. There's there are some people who say DevOps is a practice. There are teams that are called DevOps as well. We have site reliability engineering. We have the mythical DevSecOps, et cetera. How is the relationship or role? How critical is that between you, where you sit in security, and those people who have their roles and responsibilities to the platform and what have you? How does that work with you? Are you closely intertwined? Are they separate groups? How are you seeing that? And how does that need to change potentially?
We're actually incredibly closely intertwined. And in fact, a couple of the people on our team are former members of that team as well. And that helps us make sure that we, their point of view is represented and ours is represented when they do things. We have a pretty strict change management policy to make sure nobody's surprised by anything. And we're all on the same page, because reliability, keeping the systems up, and security usually go hand in hand. And if you frame it like that, they're very receptive to the controls you want to put in place or the projects you want to take on.
That's fantastic. And Garrett and I can both attest to the fact that it's not always the case. That things don't always necessarily work that way. So that's fantastic to hear. So last question for you is, as a person who's recently transitioned into a CISO role, working in something that's related to critical infrastructure from a finance perspective, what advice would you give other security leaders? Any lessons that you've learned over your, couple decades at doing this? What might you say to someone who's aspiring to be a CISO, or someone who's all of a sudden found themselves confronted with cloud native realities? What might you say?
Yeah, when confronted with all these problems, you have to make sure you're not just fighting fires the entire time. So you have to make sure you have goals, usually around a 2-year timeline is what I like to pick. That's, 5 years is way too much. 1 year, you're going to overestimate what you can do. 2 years, it's generally a good timeline of picking things that you want to take on and achieve. And that would be bullet points on your resume. You also want to make time for research. So take some time out and make sure you're actually thinking about what's going on, both for yourself and your team in the security industry, and helping other teams advance as well, learning lessons that you're going to make. Security is not done. There's no perfect playbook of starting security at a company. If you are a CISO, you're just going to be looking to make the practice better. So.
Awesome. So I have a final request for you. When you are ready, when your risk menagerie, whatever it is that you're putting together, your whole system, when you're ready to expose that and talk about that, would love to have you come back and share some of that with the audience here. Obviously, I love the risks topic and quantification and gamification, and I think it would just be super great to be able to have that conversation with you.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's definitely standing on the shoulders of other geniuses from leaderboards and quantification, and just putting some pieces together. So hopefully it worked out well.
Awesome. Well, Garrett, I really appreciate you taking time and being the first one up to bat. You're quite a brave soul. So thank you so much. And we'll look forward to hopefully talking to you in the not too distant future when you're ready to publish more about your particular risk management approach.
Thanks, Rich. It was great to talk. Appreciate it.
Thank you.